Ya. Bueno, pues nada, ya estamos aquí a disposición vuestra por si queréis hacer alguna pregunta al respecto.
Okay, welcome back, and here we are, available for you. If you have any questions, any practical questions, do we have a microphone to reach the back of the room? It's very important to ask your questions into the microphone so that everyone can understand. Is anyone listening to the English channel? Please raise your hand if you're listening to the English channel. Okay, good afternoon. My question has to do with intolerances. Food intolerances and allergic reactions that food can cause, and that I guess has a lot to do with diet. So my first son for a long time has been intolerant to lactose. Now he is no longer. He can tolerate some foods with milk in them. My second child, however, is intolerant to almost everything, so it's really difficult. He's intolerant to lactose, fructose, histamine. So I'd like to know your point of view on this. Okay, regarding intolerances, there's a beautiful work done regarding blood groups and foods. Up until now, we thought that your blood group is just something that's almost an anecdote. Now we know that if you're group O, A, B, AB, you will digest meat and fish better. If you're other groups, then you will be digesting vegetables better. Then there's also the enzymes. I've mentioned food items that promote histamines. Those people who are intolerant to lactose, lacking an enzyme called lactase. And so, of course, it's about studying those deficits and providing an appropriate diet. So, for example, in this case, there's a lot of restrictions because of all those intolerances, but we know more and more about gut microbiota and probiotics that help to fabricate enzymes that help us to digest better. So we would do a Kimber test, which is a test for bacterial flora in the stomach, and then based on that, we would design an appropriate diet and perhaps add some enzymes, just like a diabetic would have insulin. Well, if a child cannot digest food that has histamine, then you may need to add some other hormones, or you may need to add lactase if they're lactose intolerant. So those complements can help the diet to be better managed by the child. I hope I've answered your question. This is the important thing. For those of us who don't know about this, could you give us, from your point of view, the difference between a vaccine and a homeopathic pill? Yes, there's a huge difference, of course. Vaccines, especially the ones that Pasteur designed, is about provoking an infection, cultivating pathogens, and then those cultivations weaken them in a certain way, which is what they call those will be used to provoke an infection in the body that's quite light. And so the body will then react and create its own antibodies. Homeopathy does not act in that way. Basically, what it does is what they call the medicine of the contraries. So, as we were saying earlier, a very clear example is the onion that we were mentioning earlier. When you have itchy eyes nose, and sneezing, you know this is a similar reaction to the toxic reaction caused by onion, but there's no infection. Therefore, by giving that highly diluted, you can see that you stop that reaction of the body. Another example, for example, aloe vera is a laxative. If you have it in a homeopathic dose, it will have the opposite effect, an astringent. But it won't be working with the defense system. It's more about the body recognizing that substance in those dilutions, and that way to stop the pathogenic reaction to a situation. More questions? Actually, I have 2 questions. Okay, that's fine. If you could explain a bit more about the salt baths and about the purifying herbs. You've talked about capsules, but if I can have a tea, a time tea, then so much the better. I prefer to have an infusion rather than a capsule. Okay, let's talk about that. So first of all, the first question regarding baths, salty baths. It's about osmosis. The hot water opens up the pores and the salt by osmosis extracts the toxins from your body. If we want to conserve fish, how do we conserve it? With salt. When somebody has a bath with 2 kilos of salt in it, we actually are kind of conserving ourselves. The toxins are extracted. Our body has 9.4 grams of salt per liter, whereas thermal baths will have about 20 grams. And so if there's more salt outside than inside, these toxins will be released. So fats, cholesterol, urea, acids, carbon, so basically carbonic acid, uric acid, all of that will be extracted. If you take a normal bath, which is 100 liters more or less, filled up halfway, to have a good response, you need at least 20 grams of salt per liter. If we put 2 kilos in 100 liters, that will be enough. That's 2,000 grams. So there you go. That's the osmosis generated. 2 kilos, 100 liters of water. When we get in the bath, our body will displace water, and that's why we only fill it halfway. So we've often heard of salt baths, or bath salts, rather. But we don't know why that's good. Well, what it does is it detoxes the body. And all illnesses are generated by a toxic syndrome. So detoxifying the body is really good. Purifying plants are some plants that eliminate, for example, cholesterol or bile that will clean the liver. These are what we call bitter principles, and it works like this. Plants that have bitter principles, like artichoke, dandelion, and others, are those that have this bitter element. Then we have other plants that will help, for example, to dissolve stones in the kidney. We have horse's tail, green tea, and then for our lungs, we have plants that help us to cough and to bring out the toxins through the lungs, so coughing. And there's a whole range of plants there. Why have I mentioned capsules? Because we live in a society nowadays where people are running around everywhere. They don't eat at home. So a capsule is easy to carry with you. So they just have it and that's it. At the end of the day, if you can have it in a capsule, or you can break open the capsule and make yourself a tea with it, or you can have a tea at home. So what is Galeno invented the fact or the art of making medicines. So if you take a plant and you add it to a distilled liquor, he saw that the liquor would take on the color of that plant. So when we dissolve plants into cellulose, the active principles will dissolve in the plant and we will be able to access them more. Often, by doing that, by having it in a capsule, you will actually get more benefits than by having an infusion. Because when you infuse something in hot water, then remember what we said earlier, above 50 degrees, lots of vitamins will disappear. Personally, I prefer extracts and drops. And so it's about finding those active principles. And it's about finding the different plants that have different principles, extracting those in the best way that is suitable for you and that you prefer. There's other plants that are anti-inflammatory or pain-killing properties. Others help to deal with parasites in the intestine. As Hippocrates was saying, if you said to him, look, my stomach is swollen, 500 years before Christ, he would say, okay, here's a bucket, go and poo into this. And he would have a look at that poo, and if he saw little white things that moved, he knew there were worms there. So his recipe was 3 cups of onion soup, which is something that's anti-inflammatory, natural antibiotic, and it also helps with circulation, and it also gets rid of parasites. And so they said, take that during 21 days, which is the cycle, the life cycle of those worms, and after 21 days, they were fine. So this is something that's really quite ancient. The origin of medicines are plants. All medicines come from plants. So we can have plants that come from a natural origin or a synthetic origin. What is synthesis? We're isolating the active principle, and when we do the chemical formula, we can synthesize that and obtain prime matter, like, for example, with petrol. It's a forest that fossilized, and then from there we extract the active principles, which is the petrol. So that is synthesis as well. A few more questions in the room. So those salt baths, would it be equivalent to bathe in the sea, which is so close to us here, and also lemons, which are acidic, are then alkaline in the stomach? I don't quite understand that. Okay, it took me 30 years to understand that. The thing with lemons, until a good friend of mine, a biologist and a researcher who's really good at his work, said, yes, look, it's really simple. The lemon skin, the white bits on the outside, is vitamin P, P for Poland. And when you squeeze that lemon, that vitamin turns the citric acid in citrate, which is alkaline. So if you want to have fruit juice that is alkaline, you can have orange, pomegranate, whatever juice, and add the juice of a lemon, and that will make your drink alkaline. I didn't find that in any book. My friend explained it to me. Regarding the sea, yes, we always talk about thermal baths, which is warm. Now, if I go to the sea that's quite warm, it will open up my pores. If it's a cold sea, it will close my pores, and I want my pores to be open for them to detox. It's much colder in the Cantabric or Atlantic Ocean, but here in the Mediterranean, it's okay. It's a good temperature. In fact, we know We know that it's been efficient when our fingers are all wrinkled when we go into the sea because it has dehydrated us. So the idea at thermal baths was to drink clean water and exude the dirty water with the toxins in it. So I can purify my body by doing that. Hello, good afternoon. I wanted to ask about intestinal cleansing, colon cleansing, because I've been hearing a lot about it recently, and I've never actually considered it. So I want to know that there's therapies, hydrotherapy, different things. So I just want to know if there's something that we can do at home or infusions or things like that that could help us to cleanse our intestine, both intestines. I advise very much the domestic cleansing. Colon hydrotherapy has its function and is efficient, but colon hydrotherapy will only clean the colon. I tell people who are going to do that to a week before to have a laxative like aloe vera. For some people, it's very laxative. It's a bit too much. Then there's also apple juice, which is also a laxative, or apple syrup, sorry. And it basically helps to dislodge all of the stuff inside of the intestines. And then when you do the hydrotherapy, colon hydrotherapy, all the stuff that's been released will come out. There's a doctoral thesis by a doctor from the clinical hospital from Barcelona, is that up to 14 kilos of fecal waste has been extracted from a person in doing this kind of cleansing, which obviously means a lot of discomfort for that person. Things like headaches, all sorts of illnesses can be provoked by that. Our grandmothers, when they had a really bad headaches, they would have a coffee enema. Everything that you put within your rectum will be absorbed by the body more intensely. So medicine, whatever, if you put it in the rectum, it will be absorbed much better. So basically, we should be cleaning our colon every change of season. What, every 3 months? Yes. And people say, every 3 months I need to change my colon? Yes, you do. You need to cleanse it every 3 months. Don't you try not cleaning your toilet at home for 3 months and tell me what that's going to look like. So for the toilet, it seems like not a lot. But what about our inside? Feces are very sticky, and so you need to do the cleansing. And then I recommend having a spoonful of aloe vera for lunch and for dinner for a week. After a week, have an edema, and I recommend thyme, which is anti-inflammatory. It's refreshing, and it will also improve your liver functions and also your lung functions. And look at how the Chinese, the metal group, is the one that has the colon and the lungs. So this time will lead to the cleansing of the lungs as well. After that, another week of aloe vera, another edema of thyme, which is basically make an infusion with it and let it cool, and then introduce it into the rectum, and then replenish your internal flora. What about drinking seawater? What do you think of that? What about microplastics in the sea and all of that? Well, basically, I would say you need to read the work of René Quinton. He was a marine biologist from France, René Quinton, who observed that in the sea there are different strata. So marine life is very dense, between the 10 and 20 meters deep. Below that, there's less, And above that, there's also less marine life. So he analyzed this water and he saw that the water between 10 and 20 meters deep has all of the trace elements and minerals necessary for life. So what he did is he recommended Quinton's plasma, which was seawater from that level that has been filtered with micropores that would get rid of any parasites or fungi in the water. So the water needs to be sanitized. And this was the work of René Quinton, who got really good results. So it's important for that water, according to Quinton's work, for the water to be filtered. So if I've understood well, you've talked about replenishing the stomach intestinal flora. So what are these products that were being sold talking about them? Is this serious or is it a con? No, it is serious. It all started rather strangely in Canada with a doctor who was analyzing feces of healthy people and sick people. One of the things she saw is that the type of bacterial colony that were within healthy people's feces was different to sick people's feces. So she decided to do a bank of feces. So she asked lots of healthy people to donate their feces. So when you got sick and you had some kind of intestinal problem, she would do like a powder with the healthy bacteria and do an enema with that. Surprisingly, the results were really good, although the system is a little bit dodgy because it's like getting your neighbor's poo up you. It doesn't sound very nice, but the people got good responses. Well, they decided to analyze that. And from that point on, they realized that we have all sorts of bacterial groups within us that if they die off and we don't replace them, then we get sick. If you have a garden with grass, you need it to be replanted now and again. You need basically to clean out the plants you don't want to be growing in your garden. So basically what they've done is to cultivate the bacteria. Instead of introducing somebody else's feces, they have decided to cultivate all of these bacteria, and they saw that the bacteria in the nose are not the same as the ones in the lungs or the stomach, that every sector of the immune and digestive system has a different colony of bacteria that are very specific. So E. coli, for example, needs to be in the colon, not in the stomach or in the larynx. So if you replace all of those groups, the response, the therapeutic response, is very positive, very surprising. So it's not a con at all. I want to ask a question in the last minute. Do you know anyone in Spain or any example of a school or hospital where good food is offered? Well, I've seen schools, food schools, like, for example, a microbiotics school that José María Villagrasa set up, somebody I worked with and learned from. And I'm not sure if he's retired now. I've lost contact with him. But that's one of the schools that I saw back in the day and that I thought was very positive. And there's also Morpelletero, who's in Tudela, and there's a number of people dedicated to teaching nutrition. In Pamplona, for example, there was Elena Corrales, who's a biologist and who was very good at her work. But schools that can be considered consolidated as such, no, I couldn't actually say. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. At your service.
Muchas personas
Many people feel that we are experiencing a moment of accelerated change. Thousands of people march in the streets to fight against climate change, the massive extinction, pollution, and social injustice. The scientists agree that we have to change our unsustainable policies if we want to survive. Gandhi invited us to be the change that we want to see in the world. But can we become that change? How can we work together to create a society that's more sustainable, more regenerative, and more resilient? How can we participate effectively with greater conscience and more passion? In Mallorca and all over the world, people are coming together to participate on an individual level and as a community to support this change. Escola Kumar began with the vision of Guillaume Ferrer, who, inspired by Satish Kumar, wanted to try to promote sustainable life in Mallorca. Concha Vidal, a retired teacher and a community activist, offered her farm in Sasuveta for this project. She also provided support and wisdom based on her many years of teaching. We are deeply grateful to Concha for the use of her farm and for her support. Our experience with Can Magie gives us a great example of how people can share their resources together for the common good. In exchange, Permanet and many participants put into practice cultivation with fruit trees, improving the infrastructure, including the use of water, storage, and recycling. The farm provides an accessible and inspiring place to show the practical possibilities of the transition to a sustainable lifestyle. In the last 6 years, thousands of participants and visitors have benefited from hundreds of courses and workshops and other events organized by Permavid and others given by internationally renowned guests. We continue to expand our work, taking permaculture to the schools through Sustain, and the young people and the communities through the workshops and courses on permaculture. To work together with committed educators such as the teams of Sayabor and Norai and the university has been very inspiring. It is also is working with the network of people, projects, and organizations, some of which have been inspired by the Escola Kumar and Permamid. We are happy to be able to share some of these projects on this video. We hope to continue working and growing together to be part of the change that we want to see in the world. Hi, I'm Joanna, and she's Yolanda. We are teachers from the Norai School. Last school year, we began training in Permanent and in the Kumar School, and they helped us to improve our view of the world of ecology and the environment, and to have a deeper view to, little by little, introduce changes into our school. We've learned a great deal, really a great deal, because permaculture is a concept that was totally unknown to us, and it is beautiful. You connect with the earth, you connect with your surroundings, and there's respect to living beings, and it's wonderful how we get along. So it's really something to be enjoyed. So we've begun. When are you going to begin? Hi, I am Pt.3. Hi, I'm Hannah. We are working with Permamed and the Kumar School to bring permaculture to the school setting. We've had the opportunity of working with children in their own schools, looking for waters and bioconsumption. And it's a great opportunity for children to learn through their hearts, their hands, and their heads. To end, I would like to say that I recommend this project because it has been a source of inspiration for us as well as for the children and everyone involved from the school. I am Christina. and I am the director of CREATE. We represent two organizations, the Centro CREATE Foundation, and we have a program in the morning, the educational program to accompany children that are not in school. They come to share a space with the family. I am Monica. I also belong to the two organizations. Last school year, we were in the Kumar school. We went because we were aware of the work that was being done, and we thought it was interesting, and we wanted to take the children between the ages of 2 to 4, 5, 6 years of age, and we went there to explore the Kumar school and to understand all of what they do here. We were able to explore this and to see what the children felt together with the families. The parents went as well, and it was very fulfilling for everyone. Especially for us, we were very happy. We've been there twice, and we want to continue next school year as well. We invite you to participate if you like, to contact us through our email. You'll find all of the data that you need. Thank you very much. Hi, I am Nomare Vicens, and I am the co-founder of Masinterra. And we did a course on Permamed, the Kumar School, a couple of years ago, and this project came as a result. We have workshops. We put on workshops of urban gardens, and we work with little children, and we do things with compost. You are invited to come and visit us. We hope to see you.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy
Hello, I am Victor from Canom in Inca. Canom is a farm that was abandoned. The owner allowed us to go in 3 years ago. We are regenerating it. We are creating a demonstration space to show how you can live in sustainability, a little bit of eco-tourism. The CDP with Permamed was very inspiring. We learned a great deal, and we came into contact with people from the island that have the same idea, and we believe in the permaculture and its dissemination. If you're interested, please contact us, and please feel free to write us at the email that you can see here. We would be very happy to host you.
Hola, soy
Hello, I am Luis Yabres, and I am the founder of the Resilience Center of Mallorca. When half of the world's population is concentrated in cities, the Spanish rural world presents 30% of its territory with the majority of the resources. Our center and volunteers look for techniques using closer local resources to live in harmony with climate change. I am Julio Cantos, an environmental designer, and I belong to Permamed.org. Working with the university, we had a workshop for teachers in 2017 through Pt.3 Palma. In 2018, we worked with the International Solar Cooking Organization, and we have had more than 6,000 people, most of all of students from primary, secondary school from all of Mallorca. Currently, I work in the degree for children teaching teachers about agriculture, and this design can help to improve global sustainability. Hello, I am Victor Elias, and together we are part of Young People and Permaculture. I've studied at Permamed. I have a certificate in permaculture, and we have given several talks and presentations in Palma and in other countries. I design gardens and, using the principles of permaculture. I learned about permaculture at the Kumar School, and I'm working on a program to regenerate soil in Palmanora. They have given us part of their greenhouses in order to be able to start up a project, and permaculture also takes into art, so we will have soon musical activities as well. Agriculture has always been part of my life. I have taught about permaculture here in Mallorca at the Kumar School. This year, we also had the opportunity of going to London to present at the meeting of children in permaculture. This gave me the opportunity of meeting people that are interested in bringing education and permaculture together, putting them together in a very holistic way. Hi, I am Marina. I study biochemistry at the University of the Balearic Islands. I'm part. It is inconceivable that we're not doing anything about the climate crisis, and if we wait any longer, it won't be possible. Hi, I'm Mabel, and I am part of the Extinction Rebellion movement. For me, this movement has been a way of expressing our concerns that have to do with our environment and this climate crisis and the existential crisis that we're experiencing. And for me, being able to work through this disruptive action and nonviolent civil disobedience is, for me, one of the ways in which we can be empowered in society, and we can pressure the governments and institutions to take serious measures. Hi, I am Virginia Geisel, co-director of the Academy in Palma. It's an educational project based on the holistic education, and most of all, emotional education that goes from October until April for young people between 18 and 23 years of age. If you feel you're a little bit lost and you need to clear up your ideas and find your path in life, or to learn more about yourself and to strengthen your values and discover your professional vocation, perhaps this course might be of interest to you. We're ready to begin on the 17th of October. If you want to sign up, you can contact with us, email, or through our website, and we'd be happy to receive you.
Benvinguts a Artífex Balear.
Welcome to the Balearic Islands.
Artífex ha entrat en una nova era.
Welcome to Artifex Balear. And from now on, our project evolves and we're focusing on climate change and on giving responses at a local level with the resources that we have here and now. We have a program of regenerative agriculture and a program of bioconstruction and a third program dedicated to energy. All three of them work together holistically, and what we're looking for is people who want to incorporate or to come into the project in this new phase.
Informing yourself about the science behind Extinction Rebellion, deep adaptation, or Greta Thunberg, and you are aware of the IPCC models for beyond 2 degrees increase, then you are aware and we should talk. We have ideas, we have plans, and we are working on them. So come and let's have a conversation.
Mi nombre es Pt.3.
My name is Atuk, and I'm part of MEM, the eco-social Mallorquian movement, which is based on group facilitation and group work in order to bring out the seeds of ecological transition projects on the island. In order to advance, we need to know about your projects, because the best forests are made up of many, many different varieties of plants, just like projects. On the 28th of March, we're going to get together again, and we need your heart, your head, and especially your hands.
Okay, it's me again. I'm very grateful to be allowed to have a second opportunity to say the many things that I should have said yesterday and didn't. Now I have been here for 24 hours, I have a much clearer sense of who you are, what are the themes that matter to you. So I hope what I say will engage well with what interests you. Many people have asked me why I didn't talk more about the book that I wrote with Thich Nhat Hanh as the co-author. Oh, that's me, yes, I was wondering what you were all looking at. It's quite weird when you look at yourself behind you. Anyway, focus on the front. And I think one reason is because I'm English and we like self-effacement. But I thought this is not very helpful. You have come to hear about the kind of themes that are in the book. So I will talk about the themes, and I will particularly talk about Thich Nhat Hanh, who may be the most important Zen master that you've never heard of. He's often talked about as the next best known, but he's not well enough known, and I think his story and his themes are very inspirational. And I'd like to start by talking about the link between the world of activism and the world of understanding oneself. And if you could pop that slide up, please. Thank you. I only have one slide, you will be relieved to know today. Thich Nhat Hanh, when he was a very young monk, was in Vietnam as the war was breaking out. And he was a young novice monk in a monastery. And he took it on himself to argue with the leaders of the monastery, which can't have been easy, and to say we must stop sitting on our bottoms on cushions meditating and chanting, and we must get out there. There is a war raging between the north and the south, and there are people dying, there are sick people, there is a need for food to get out there. So he and a small group of monks left the monastery and spread out across Vietnam, going up the rivers into war zones, spreading food, putting together healthcare centers for the wounded and the injured. So he was immediately seeing that there is a link between action and his inner work. And realizing that America was not really helping in this situation, he took himself to the United States, again, as a very young monk who had never left Vietnam before, and met up with Martin Luther King, who most of you will know, I hope, but some of you may be too young to appreciate the importance of this man, who was the major catalyst in the civil rights movement in the United States. And Thich Nhat Hanh met up with him and persuaded him to come out against the war in the United States, which had a huge impact on the fact that the war then ended. So that was a good thing to do. The irony was that in the process, Thich Nhat Hanh was exiled from his own country and has remained in exile until very recently indeed, which has been a source of great sorrow for him. So that is the bad news. But in the way that some of these Buddhist stories do, that we never know how a story is going to end, the impact of him leaving Vietnam was to set up a string of amazing monasteries and retreat centers across the world, including one that I'm familiar with, Plum Village in France, which is a great place to visit. But there are monasteries in Thailand and in the United States as well. And so he saw right from the beginning this link between activism and inner work. I think this is obvious to everyone in this room, that these two things are connected, but it's not obvious out there. I hear a great deal of criticism of mindfulness, of meditation, of work on the self, that it is individualistic again. This is selfish. We haven't got time to sit and meditate when the world is falling apart. You know, it's seen as the enemy of activism, and it's being attacked from the left, in fact, from the liberal wing, saying that there is no time for this. And I think this story illustrates so beautifully how, until we get control of ourselves and really get a sense of what we can achieve in the world, we're not going to be any use to activism. But also, we do need to become active and take his story to heart and not just sit on our bottoms and be satisfied with ourselves, that we're good people who understand ourselves, so we meditate. And I think that's an important message from his story. I'll take the clapping for Thich Nhat Hanh. I didn't personally do much about that situation. But in the process of negotiating between the North and the South, which is what he attempted to do in Vietnam, he learned very good negotiating skills. And one of the things that he has been teaching lay people and monastics ever since is this skill of understanding the other person and really getting into their skin, realizing that they're the same as you are. And it's a little known story that he and his monastics and lay community were very influential in the Paris Agreement, scuttling around between different parties and making sure that there was consensus and agreement, and bringing people who had very strong positions down a little and negotiating and deals between different factions. Again, really important for us to know, I think, how we need to do that. We're not going to tackle this problem by only talking to people who right now agree with us. We need to be reaching out, and I think that's the story that he tells us so vividly. I'll just tell you a little, if I may, about how Wake Up Schools came about. Wake Up Schools was the movement that led to the book that is, in a sense, the guidebook for Wake Up Schools. Again, it came from a piece of action. There was a lot of violence happening in Paris, particularly with young people who were very disaffected. And Thich Nhat Hanh offered to the French government to lead the way with what he called at the time mindful youth for secular ethics. He called it Wake Up Schools after a while because people told him that mindful youth for secular ethics was not a very sexy title and wasn't really going to set anyone alight. So Wake Up Schools became the name. But the point of it was to get young people to reflect on their own behavior and what they were doing in the world by understanding themselves better. And that's what led really to the Wake Up School movement, which then became a major activity with huge educators' retreats. There was one in Barcelona, in fact, a few years back. I met them when they were in London. I went with them to Toronto. There was big retreats where hundreds, sometimes thousands of people would come. We had 5,000 people meditating in Trafalgar Square at one point in the London retreat. It was amazing. And that was what that led to. And so the book that we wrote, what we put together, and that his inspiration, all words are in there, and the words of the teachers, was in a sense the outcome of that, trying to capture all this amazing work. And I'll tell you a little, if I may, about the philosophy that underlies it, because it relates so comfortably to everything we've talked about here. People often say, how can happy teachers change the world? Happiness. Who wants to just be happy in this terrible world? You know, it's a thin idea, it's narcissistic, it's facile. I think his concept of happiness was very akin to Mukti's notion of well-being and what we actually want from our lives, you know, what makes us happy, what gives us quality of life. Thich Nhat Hanh is very clear that happiness never comes from possessions. And I don't need to rehearse this because Mukti's done it so brilliantly. But he would have completely endorsed your two lists. What makes people happy is relationships, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of being connected with others. It's not possessions, and it's actually not running after excitement. It's not always seeing new things, traveling and just seeing everything anew. It's settling down sometimes with what you've got and seeing the joy in that. Now, he's taught this philosophy, you may be surprised to know, to people like Google executives. He had the entirety of the Google executive workforce in tears at one point when he was invited there, looking deeply inside themselves and realizing how everything they were doing really wasn't bringing them satisfaction. And when he'd done his talk to the Google executives, there was a massive queue of people in suits saying, please, will you come to my office and teach me to meditate now? So I think we can see that this is a message that actually resonates with all kinds of people, not just the kind of people in this room. And it's a very powerful message. What is true happiness? It is not about possessions. Another very interesting concept that he talked about was interbeing, the sense that we are all fundamentally connected. Is this still on? I have a lot of trouble with this thing. I don't know why. Thank you. If I come again, I want the kind of headset Madonna has, please. Anyway. And interbeing is such a powerful idea because it's not just that we're connected with each other, which we are, and it's not just that we're connected with all life forms, sentient life. It's that sense of impermanence and how everything is made of everything else. He talks a great deal about what is a cloud. Is it water? Is it the glass of water you just drank? Where does the cloud go when it disappears? He is extremely good at explaining this in very vivid terms, including to children, that there is, in a sense, no such thing as an I and a me and separation between things on the planet, that we're connected through our molecules, through our energy, that it is all one planet, and everything we do impacts on everything else. And it's a very powerful idea, I think. And it links with another very powerful idea, which I find ever so helpful, which is of no duality. He has a wonderful image of the mind as a flower bed containing all kinds of seeds. There's the lovely seeds that we want to cultivate: kindness, compassion, happiness, joy. But he would be very realistic about what we are like as human beings and say also in this flower bed are all the other seeds that we have as a function of our evolution: jealousy, territorialism, selfishness, possessiveness. These are all in there. And if we imagine that we are lovely people who don't have these impulses, we're deluding ourselves. And we're more likely to fall prey to them without even knowing it, to be doing things that are not what we want to do because we've deluded ourselves that we're nice people. What he talks about is how you become a decent, wholesome person by watering the seeds that you want to water, by cultivating them and allowing the others to wither. You don't fight them, you don't deny them, you acknowledge they're there, you just don't feed them. And over time, they will wither away. But he is very powerful on the idea that any of us could be anyone. Those of us in this room, if we were born in a different family, could be those 9 corporates who are destroying the planet, if we were in that situation. It comes from the same human impulses to be happy. You may be going about it all wrong if you're a greedy corporate, but you still are imagining that in some deluded way you're doing the right thing for yourself, for your family, and that if we're going to persuade people who are doing toxic things to our planet, we have to treat them as people. We have to bring compassion to why do they feel like this? Why do they not notice what they're doing? A very powerful message, I think Thich Nhat Hanh would say, is, okay, you people, you want to leave things to your children. That's probably why you're so greedy, because you want to pass things on. Are you really going to pass on an empty planet? Are you really going to pass on the idea that, yes, Granddaddy did this, I'm afraid, but never mind, we're all holed up in a bunker in New Zealand, so we're all right. The rest of the planet has gone to the dogs. It's just not a message that anyone would want to really live by if they really looked at it. So we have to assume that these people who are the enemy in our minds are also parents, grandparents, they're people, and find ways to talk to them that is not a head-on dualistic fight. And I think that's really quite an important message to think about. What else would he say if he was here, I think? Well, one is about the idea that if there is no dualism, that joy and sorrow are 2 sides of the same coin. That we can only feel intense joy because we're able to feel sorrow. That it's the price we pay for being fully formed human beings. And something I think is becoming quite interesting is to help all of us to deal with the kind of grief work we need to do to come to terms with what's happening to the planet. I was very moved by the testimony of the parents yesterday who lost their child and the stages of grief they'd been through. And many people in the world are suffering grief for what we're losing. And we don't deal with that just by saying, no, there's hope, let's just all work together and everything will be fine tomorrow. We acknowledge the sadness. We acknowledge the guilt and the shame for what we've done in order to be able to process it, to move on to hope, to activism. It doesn't have to be a recipe for despair, but unless we acknowledge the deep sorrow many of us are feeling for what's happening in the world, we're not going to be able to move on from it. And I think that's quite an important thing to think about, particularly when we're working with young people who will quite rightly be seriously angry with what's happened and be full of grief for what they may be losing out on. To acknowledge that, I think, is a very important part of our work. So I know we want to think positive and be hopeful, and of course we do, but the hope needs to be built on kindness and sympathy and compassion for the difficult emotions that we're all going through. And I've met many people at this conference who said, "Do you know, I can't bear to think about this anymore. I can't bear to see another film about destruction and what's going to happen in 10 years' time." And people are putting their hands over their ears because they can't bear to look at it. We have to take that seriously and with compassion, I think, and that's really important too. But we also need to build up the positive. None of us will protect things we don't love. So Sadi, she's absolutely right. We need to have gardens, we need to involve young people in life on the planet to help them to see what it is that matters. And people who are locked away in cities, they don't even know really what it is we're losing because they're not seeing that on a daily basis. Thich Nhat Hanh was a very keen gardener and was out there, although one of the world's most engaged people, he was out there on a daily basis weeding, picking tomatoes, keeping absolutely in touch with the gardens around the monasteries where he worked. And I think that's, again, really important to all of us to remember that we need to connect at a deep level with what matters to us. And these are really just some themes that I looked at, and in a moment I'll open you to questions. But I think the final thing he would say, that it's so absolutely vital to listen to young people. I know the title of the book is Happy Teachers Change the World, but I think he and I and all of us involved would be the first to say it's not the happy teachers in the end who are going to change the world, it's the young people. And that our job is to pilot young people through to the future so they can also experience that genuine, complex, non-dualistic happiness that is needed to help all of us survive, let us hope, into the next century. So I hope that engages a little more with some of the themes that you have raised at this conference. All of that philosophy is written in the book. And all of it actually, I think, would interest you to know, is there exemplified with examples from teachers who are working in classrooms, in schools, in universities, with this philosophy to make it absolutely real and present. Tiny example, teachers who will say to their kids, exactly as you did, Mukti, okay, what makes you happy? What gives you quality of life? And young people immediately, even those who are immersed in the internet and the world of celebrity and so on, will realize that it's thin, that it's hollow, and they start more or less immediately talking about family, relationships, friendships. Everyone knows what matters, and you will find many examples in the book of turning these kind of theoretical ideas into genuine activities in schools, classrooms, communities. There's examples of community workers working with the disadvantaged in the streets in South America. There is really solid examples there. I would love to have more time to explain them, but I think you would enjoy looking at that real-life testimony. About half of the book is real-life examples of people putting this kind of theory into daily practice with kids and with themselves. So I hope that you might find that useful. Okay, I think that's filled in the gaps, has it, Guillaume, of what I didn't say yesterday. So I would be delighted to take any comments, or you don't have to ask the guru questions. I don't like the ask the guru model. You may want to make a comment or to say something that relates to yourself. But if you have got a question, I would be delighted to answer it about anything I said today or yesterday. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. And it's wonderful to see the teachers here and the involvement of the teachers and the direction of the teachers. And I think it's a very extremely positive, for a non-teacher, an extremely positive element within this whole climate change and saving the world, initiative. the children are another extremely important element, and so the children are motivating, and that is another important element. But I want to talk a little bit about the parents, because the children are setting the vision, the teachers are giving it discipline and direction, but the power base really in all of this is, if you've got one teacher and you've got 20 children, you've got 40 parents. And so the parents are the ones that are, I think, really an important element in mobilizing this and, talking about activism and pragmatic activism. How do we talk to the parents? How do we get them involved? Because, as the old saying goes, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yeah. That's a very good point.
Thank you.
I think the first thing to say is that the book, and I should mention that Thich Nhat Hanh has written in 200 other books, so his philosophy is found everywhere, but are being read by all kinds of people, not just teachers. And all the messages that I just spelt out are exactly the same if you're a parent. What is it you're trying to teach your children will make them happy? Perhaps we should be looking hard at how we tend to buy things for our children and to give them the idea that you love them, therefore you fill up their Christmas stocking with hundreds of toys and presents, and that you praise them for their achievements at school and look a bit fed up when they don't. All the little things we do to direct our children's attitudes are exactly the same in a way. It's the same messages for teachers as for parents. But your question more specifically was, how do you engage parents? Well, I guess one thing you might do if you're a teacher is to not assume that your parents are not already engaged in this. We tend to be a bit full of ourselves when we're in schools and to think that the parents are not already engaged in it. It may be a matter of reaching out into the community and saying, right, this is what we're into. What are you doing? How can we join together on joint projects on reducing carbon, for example? How can we look at what our children are eating? How can we share messages with our children about what really matters in life? How can we praise them for their achievements rather than be hard on them when they don't achieve? You can look at basically the interface between the ethos and values of the school and reach out to the parents. Parents' evenings, postcards home are very helpful. How many schools send postcards home or messages home to parents when children do something right? You're always hearing, if you're a parent, about what they did wrong. But it's a lovely thing to open a postcard and it says, John was brilliant today. He really helped another child who was struggling. I mean, what a lovely thing to open these postcards. I think it's often in the small things. There's no one answer to your question, right, if we do this, it will work. It's a matter of seeing the school and the community and the families as one thing. And again, you will find many examples in the book, particularly of primary schools. It's often easier to do this with younger children than, sadly, at secondary school. I think we need to make a real effort to join secondary and schools and the community. But in primary schools, you find many examples of parents and schools working together. And to work together on ecological things is extremely important. But I think it's also important, too, to acknowledge that some children may be very frightened by these messages they're getting in school, by the stories of dying polar bears. I mean, it inspired Greta. Other children, and I say this as a parent of 3 very fragile children who were adopted as older children and had been through a lot of trauma, they can find this kind of thing very concerning. So I think we have to make sure that we have a dialogue about mental health and well-being, as well as about spelling out the messages, and not put too much emphasis on the young people must lead this. It may be rather hard on them. So I think parents, children, young people need to find ways to work together. It may be a slightly woolly answer to your question if you wanted a sort of simple technique, but I think it goes right across the whole communication between all the different parties.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
I've stunned you into silence. Anybody got a comment? I would be perfectly happy to hear comment. You don't have to ask a question. Whether anything I said was, struck a chord with you, perhaps. Guillaume's going like this. Thank you.
Berta Cáceres.
I think this will be in English. Yes. Berta. Thank you, Berta. Woman, peasant, indigenous, and peace worker. Woman, peasant, indigenous woman, and peace worker. She was judged by men, businessmen who were white, and military men, businessmen, white, and military. And for obstructing productivism, accumulation, progress, and competitiveness, they decided she should be killed with a bullet. I wanted to begin with this little homage to Berta Cáceres. And as Satish was saying about all of us being poets, I would like to share with you some lines inspired in all this. And the first, of course, I wanted to make reference to this brave woman. In the same way that the second poem or text, I would like to read you a text I wrote some years ago, thinking of Lolita Chávez. She's also a peasant woman. She's very small in size. She's a Mayan indigenous woman, one of the leaders of the Quiché peoples who are defending nature, the rivers, like Berta, facing the companies that come from other countries to build mines and to build other massive infrastructures, such as, for example, Florentino Pérez, the owner of Zara, famous Spanish man. Oh, sorry, he's not the owner of Zara. He's the president of Real Madrid Football Club. Sorry. So she has been opposing these mining and water rights in such a way that they finally managed to get international protection. Lolita was telling me that these women do 1, 2, 3, 4 labor days in one single day, whereas the men do very little. In her first working day, it's Lola who goes out to the field, who works with the animals and with her crops. Her second work day is Mama Lola, who takes on the tasks at home with many mouths to feed and wash. Her third working day, it's Lolita, compañera Lolita, who goes to assemblies and meetings with other colleagues, and they're conspiring before those who come to destroy. And I said, so what's the fourth one then? And she said, she changed her smile that she had all during her whole conversation, and she turned to a painful expression, and she said, you know what, in the assemblies, you lose your shame, you get brave, and then your worries and dreams come out. And that's when your fourth working day comes out, that many of us have to do when we get home at night, almost daily, in bed, where there's a strange man that demands sex without love. Against that property, now it's Dolores who speaks. Against that property, sense of ownership, we're also going to fight.
Mosquitoes? Oh, good one. Florentino Pérez.
So probably the verb to fight is probably a synonym of the verb to love in some contexts. I don't know if we're aware of this or not. But Dolores, Berta, 3 girls who came here representing the Extinction Rebellion movement. It's a rebellion of care. It's a rebellion that is giving value to the origin of life and the origin of the earth. But while this happens, and they are the ones who are killed and assassinated, we cannot forget countries that are constantly having to defend their land. Yesterday I spoke to you about my friend Jerome Aguado. We're part of the Via Campesina movement, which is an international movement of small peasant farmers, an international movement that is the most wide-reaching movement that connects more than 200 million families. Families from Mallorca, from Nepal, who defend that farming should be in the hands of small peasants, that they are the ones who should be producing food, healthy, sustainable food for the population. And in the 5th conference of the Via Campesina, which was organized in Maputo, Jeromo, an anonymous peasant from Palestine, gave him a piece of paper, a poem, and asked him to please read this out loud whenever he was in public. An anonymous peasant farmer from Palestine. And I have that small poem, and I also read it out for everybody when I'm in public. To burn our soil, to burn our dreams, to shower our songs with acid, to put sawdust on the blood of those of us who have been killed, to destroy our valleys with your bombs, to erase our past with your editors, erase our literature, our metaphors, to leave naked the soils and the forests until neither insects nor words will find a place to hide. Drown with your technology the shout of everything that is free and wild and original. Destroy our history and our soil, our villages that were built by our elders, the trees, the homes, the books, the laws, and all equity and all harmony. Do that and even more. I'm still not afraid of tyranny. I will never despair because I hold a seed, a small seed that is alive and that I will care for and plant again. To the teachers here present, male and female teachers. It's confusing in Spanish. I remember now when we started to work on incorporating equal gender language, and you realize that it's difficult to change because in Spanish, masculine and feminine is something that, well, we've always used the masculine as the plural, and so it's difficult to change that when you've been brought up that way. But I was in Latin America, and in an attempt to show this gender equality in one of my speeches in Latin America, I said something completely wrong. Anyhow, it was just a little confusion in the head there with trying to put feminine and masculine and include both. But the effort is there. So thinking of Palestine, do you know what they have in common between wheat wheat, pulses, sheep, cows, corn, chickens, all of that, what do they have in common? So wheat, barley, linseed, pigs, sheep, cows, that Syria, the Fertile Crescent, offered us that 10,000 years ago. And now we thank them with war. All of Mediterranean agriculture, of our agriculture, came to us thanks to the migrations of peoples who came from Palestine, Syria, Iran, Iraq. And now we thank them with bombs and with bullets. Wherever you go, there's berries everywhere. The Bible told us that we would walk through a valley of berries and of fences. This is a play on words because valla means fence, it also means berry, and it also means to go. So this poem is a bit of a play on words that cannot really be translated. But Europe is like a porcupine with all its keeping people out. Europe is an island that isolates. Europe is a piece of land that's surrounded with fences everywhere. Europe is a monoculture of fences. Because instead of bringing us close, Europe learnt to build up walls. Again, another play on words. That's the thing with poetry, it's not so easy to translate. To those interested, I would like to explain that the illustrations of this book is an Ecuadorian friend. We don't hardly hear what is happening there in Ecuador and the capacity of a people to put their government up against the wall, which is something that our people seem to have lost. And when we talk about disruption, perhaps we need to disrupt at the scale of that country, the way they have done. Sofia Costa has done the illustrations of this book inside and on the cover, and it's done with the resin from a tree that's also called the blood of the drago, which is this tree. They also call it that way in the Canary Islands. And the indigenous peoples, with this resin, they make healing products that help wounds heal, and there are all sorts of creams for the body. And so she said to me, this is a healing book. If you've got a headache, just put it up against your head. Put it on your belly if you've got a bellyache. This is a healing book. It's been made with the resin of this plant. Imagine a weekend like this, where what was being discussed is the problem of planned obsolescence. And after many, many cases being discussed, including robots and telephones and kitchen appliances, all sorts of things that are made so that after a certain amount of time, they're no longer useful, they no longer work, and so you have the need to buy them again, new. After that, now it's time for closure. Onto the stage came Manuela, a peasant from Villaconejos, where close to the Tajo River she looks after her vegetable gardens. Manuela showed her a little object in the palm of her hand and said, in less than 5 millimeters, this tiny microchip will store millions of data that once processed will give way to a fruit that is almost 2 kilos of fresh, sweet meat. And inside of this fruit, called a melon, there will be hundreds of new little pieces like this. It's called a seed. And each one of these seeds will repeat the same process. They just need a little bit of care. As far as I know, said Manuela, since the 16th century on my land, this technology has never stopped working. It never broke down. Now, this is a story that's really beautiful and that I read. And I want to thank this man because I always think he's sometime going to pop up in a talk and say, that was my story. And I don't know whose it is, but I also like to say that another anonymous man who gave me this story. Carlos Espín says, for a moment, imagine how amazing it would be if trees, perennial trees or seasonal trees, very old or very young, giant or tiny, with or without leaves, imagine that they all produced Wi-Fi waves. That all types of trees, any tree you can think of, if trees produced Wi-Fi, they would all be considered sacred beings. Temples that we would defend with our best energies and all sorts of assistance. If they produced Wi-Fi, forests would be declared spaces of public interest. If they were to produce Wi-Fi in order to get more coverage, we would plant trees everywhere. In schools, in our gardens, on terraces, on empty pieces of wasteland. If trees produced Wi-Fi, there wouldn't be any concrete squares. In fact, we would be pulling down industrial areas to fill them with trees. Cities would be kind and sustainable, and in a stroke, we would recover biodiversity. And with this technology of reforestation, the danger of climate change would be a thing of the past. However, trees don't produce Wi-Fi. What a shame. Unfortunately, they only produce the air we breathe. So we've been talking these days also about capitalism and how capitalism uses as a key tool coin, so the coin economy. And I ask myself, what if here and now everyone here gathered were to declare ourselves rebellious and decide to create our own coin, our own currency, a new currency that would never run out because we could all produce in an artisan way as much as we needed. A currency that could not be stolen or controlled because each of those coins would have a stamp on it, unique and intransferable, that could not be falsified. A coin that would be physical and that can be held in our hands, but made out of a material that will make it impossible to accumulate it, because little after using it, they would disintegrate. Coins that would make it as pleasant to pay as it would be to receive money. And that would also serve to say thank you, to ask sorry, to ask for help, to ask for support. And from its very nature, we think that these coins may emerge spontaneously to respond to the needs that we all have and the care that we all need. Currency that, unlike all the payment systems that the consumer society has to offer us, like bank transfers and credit cards, in this new monetary system, we would only accept affectionate payment. Why? Because it would be kisses. That would be our new local currency. Kisses that gathered today here, in rebellion, we propose this coin that has never before been used as a currency. So from now on, you need to tell me how you want me to finish, because I could spend all evening here reading for you. So because I'm a teacher, oh no, because you are teachers, I would like to read this that I wrote a long time ago. Today we're talking about extinction or rebellion, and you here work with books. So I think this short text will fit in well. It's called Collapse. When the collapse was undeniable, when there was very little food left for the population, all the governments in the world put their strategies into place to try to save as many people as they could. The more technological governments launched into the space hundreds of ships with thousands of people aiming to find a new planet where they could live. It either didn't exist or they weren't able to find it. The most powerful governments went through borders with tanks and bombs, hoping to conquer some regions where life could still be possible. But no, the collapse was general. The more rich governments went to their scientists and asked them, in exchange for a lot of money, how they could eat all of the gold that they had, how they could make the gold become a drink. But alchemists couldn't come up with the answer. In the most educated and at the same time small country, they looked around. They had large amounts of books. They had accumulated tons of books. So they started to take those books, pile them up, and build walls in the countryside. Others opened up in half and chained up, helped to make channels to take the rainwater to those new vegetable gardens. And finally, they started to pull out the pages of these books, those that were repeated, those that were already old because they had been read so much, and they chopped them up and buried them into those fields, giving to the soil the carbon that brings life, bringing to us the idea that good knowledge takes up no place, and good knowledge will always feed us.
No one saw the hundreds of kilometers around them. No matter how hard you tried, no one could. No trees from any forest. No tree stayed standing, not a one. Not a one minus one. It was a tree that seemed to be sickly and small. Families of shepherds went by that tree, that single tree, with their flocks, and none of those shepherds cut off one of the branches to make a cane or a walking stick, nor did any of the women hang from them clothes to be dried, nor did the sheep eat the leaves from those small branches, nor did children with knives carve hearts into the trunk, and no birds built their nests there, not even the winds. The winds stopped being respectful before that final tree that was so fragile, because they knew that they had found the breath of what would become a forest. And to finish, concerning the Maraterra conference. It was when the first woman died that that gray planet took life. The last beating of the heart turned it into just soil, all of it, all soil. The same occurred with her children and her daughters, her boys, her sons and her daughters, and the sons and daughters of her sons and daughters. Their bodies, as if they'd been created from clay, became soil. Tons of soil made of millions of men and women that today modeled into a giant sphere we call the earth. That's why cultivating the earth is to hug it, because the fruits of the earth are our ancestors and they taste like we do. For that reason, Mother, we are born to become soil or earth. It could be either.
Gracias, Gustavo. Gracias.
Very well. Nalis Jai is a woman who lives in London that should be here. She was supposed to be here, but she will be present in a video that she has sent to us. Practically the same thing has happened as occurred with Susanna that we saw before. Her father has required emergency surgery this Saturday, and well, that happened on Thursday, and Alice J has sent us a 15-minute video. And she will tell us a bit about the movement. I don't know if you're familiar with it. There are millions of activists that are connected to this Avad, and Avas, they are working together to make a better world. And right after the video, then we will invite Albert and Rafael to come to the stage.
Hola, buenos días, Mallorca. Primero y ante
Good morning, good afternoon, Mallorca. First of all, thank you, and I'm so sorry not to be there with you all. I would really love to share ideas and hugs with you all, but this time it won't be possible. I love that this group continues to gather every year. I've been there since the beginning, like 15 years ago. And for me, Soil Soul Society will always hold a very special place in my heart. And that's why I'm so sad not to be able to be there. But this year, really, it's just not possible for me. That's why I'm making a video, which I've never done before, so I hope it works, in order to share a little bit of what I have experienced and my point of view regarding activism and the climate emergency that we are living. I'm going to begin with what, for me, are the 3 V's of activism in Spanish, 3 V's. From my point of view, to be an activist is to be a human being. Each one of us is active in our lives, and the question is where and what we do with our activism, with our activity, with what we consume, what we eat, what we do with our time, who we share our time with. We are beings who are in action, and so for me, being an activist regarding climate emergency is my day-to-day. What do we do from the moment we get up to the moment we go to sleep? So it's not just about hitting the streets or going on a demo. It's a way of life, from my point of view. And for that, I talk about the 3 V's. The first is our voice, the second is our vote, and the third is the volume. So I'm going to talk about all 3. Our voice. For 10 years, I was working with a movement, a global movement called AVAS, that actually means voice in many Oriental languages. And the idea from the beginning was to bring together voices from around the world in order to have a higher volume, in order to have an effect or an impact in these topics that affect us. I also speak of a voice as an individual, my own voice. What do I say? Not just what I think, but what I say. And as I said earlier, how I act towards other beings, not just human beings, but all the other species on the planet. So voice for me is an individual activism of how to live. And this for me is the number one thing in activism. Who am I? How do I live? And what do I do with my life? This is the first thing. Secondly, vote. Many people, and quite rightly so, are quite skeptical about politics nowadays. We live through times when those who are governing have attitudes and ways of carrying out policies and of doing politics that many of us don't really agree with. In fact, we disagree with a lot, oftentimes, with what they do and what they say and how they act. So right now, one could say, I'm not sure if my vote is worth anything. But actually, we live in a time of supposed democracy. And what we can see is that although it's not the solution to everything, because as I said in the beginning, most of it has to do with our personal attitude and our personal actions, to vote and use our right to vote and to try to put into government people and individuals who represent our values is something that can help advance more quickly than we can as individuals what needs to be done in this time of climate crisis. And therefore, our vote is fundamental. It's really important. The third is volume. I've seen in my work with Avaz that it is the amount of people that can together have an impact on the world. That is what's interesting. For example, I have seen how in the beginning of the work that we did huge petitions with millions of people. And this is when we were taking petitions to the politicians. They were really surprised by the fact that so many people was prepared to say that they wanted, for example, 100% of clean energies, or that they wanted to stop the taxes that are being paid to petrol companies. And this had an impact on those people because they were saying, oh, those who vote for me, those who have given me this role as a politician want something different. They want this. So it's almost like saying to them, look, you see yourself as a politician, but actually you work for me and my friends and those of us who are citizens in this place. And so the volume of people who can come together with the same voice, with the same message, is also something that has an effect. I've seen it time and time again. Over time, big petitions became quite common, so we then moved on to other strategies, such as calling the offices of those politicians or the offices of large corporations, sending them messages, text messages, even going to their offices with groups of people to say to them that we want something different. So using voice, vote, and volume all together was the basis of the work in Avaz. Something else we did was to gather funds. So when I was working with Avaz, we were connecting with 50 million people around the world. They were all Avaz members. And of those people, if somebody gives €1 and another one gives 10 and that comes together, you can get a lot of money And we were able, in the climate issue, to finance and give funding to quite a lot of the marches and demonstrations in the streets. We also bought part of the jungle in Borneo. We were even capable of financing a Maasai group so that they could create their own conservancy. Because by gathering enough funds together and with a good idea, you can really do something. We also put money together for a campaign against Monsanto, which was the basis of something really big. And so not just the voice can come together, but also the funds can come together. Right now, I am very encouraged by Fridays for Future. Those kids who are out on the streets, it makes me very sad and makes me feel a bit useless into how a woman of 50-something that I am, that my child has to hit the streets because we haven't managed to do it ourselves. But I'm very encouraged by her own courage and determination. And at the same time, Extinction Rebellion, I've spent a couple of days in the streets of London with them now. They have completely blocked up the center of London, and this determination to use civil disobedience to ensure that the British government will listen, and I know it's happening in other countries of the world, that they will listen and realize that people are actually prepared to cause disruption because the destruction that is coming has nothing to do with it. And this is the message that these young people want to give, and I think this is a hope for the future, these movements that are emerging now, that they're realizing that what we have done up to now is just not enough. We need to go further. And I think that bringing together these marches and strikes together with what is systematic, so every week, changing our way of living, raising our voices before those who represent us and the corporations that are capturing or that capturing our democracies, then this altogether has the possibility of changing what we're experiencing. And one of the quotes that I like the most in the world is from Margaret Mead, and she says, "Never doubt that a small group of reflexive citizens who are committed can change the world. In fact, that's the only thing that ever has." And that is my experience, that groups of citizens together can bring about changes in the world. And what happens, though, is that time is running out, and that, as we know, the climate emergency is upon us. And so we need to increase and accelerate our actions in order to get further. So that's why I've gone to work now with National Geographic on a campaign that's called the Campaign for Nature. And the reason why I've joined this team is because I have read a lot about climate change. And I think there are many people who say that it is now a time for adaptation, that there's nothing left to do. I'm one of those who will fight to the end. And so I'm really aware of what is coming, and I want to do everything possible to stop as much as possible. The Campaign for Nature is based on a scientific analysis that says that 30% of the solutions for climate emergency come from nature, lo que se denomina en inglés carbon sinks, que son... Oh, sorry, I switched languages there. So carbon sinks are ecosystems that should remain intact, and this we need to ensure, and we need to amplify them by reforesting, rewilding, regenerating, on our own planet, which is a lot wiser for us to help the planet restore itself. Nature can heal if we just let her. It's like magic. Therefore, we're working on a global agreement that is similar to the Paris Treaty about climate change, that should be about nature and that will be presented to all the countries in the world in China next year in a convention that is called the Biodiversity Convention. And the idea is to ask all the countries on the planet to protect 30% of the planet by 2030. Truth is, we need to protect 50% of the planet. But if we try to do something quickly over the next 10 years, 30% is viable, it's possible. We already have 15% protected. And almost half of the planet is actually still in its natural state, or almost natural state. So actually this is viable, this protection. 37% of the planet is within indigenous conservations. And so if we gave rights to the wisest guardians on the planet to remain and care for their spaces, this would amplify the possibility to protect such a large area as is required. So it needs to be in areas that are of key biodiversity, not like my garden or stuff like that, but actually there are maps already made out of those places that can retain the maximum carbon and biodiversity. And these are the ecosystems that we need to protect, because we know that we're on the way to seeing 1 million species in danger of extinction. And few people seem to realize that it's not just a crisis for other species, it's our water, our air, our food, and our survival that depends on solving this problem of the ecosystems. And so nowadays, we are disconnecting from our own sustaining system with deforestation, with overfishing. And so scientists have found this formula, which is that if 30% can be protected and another 20% can be designed or designated as areas for climate stabilization, we can still remain below a rise of 1.5 degrees. And we can also recover species and ecosystems. I think it's now 15 key countries that we've managed to convince to agree and commit to this aim of 30% by 2030. And that's what I will be working on for the next year and a half. And I wanted to share this with you all because for me right now, this is the activism that I most wanted to focus on, because I think that the solutions that nature has to offer and our climate emergency are right there within our reach. And if everybody could know this, and if large corporations who are destroying nature could be stopped, if we could pressure the governments who are not doing it and increase the demand for them to protect, then we have an opportunity to really tackle climate emergency. And because the relationship with nature, whether you're right wing or left wing, if we close our eyes, I think we can all think of a place in the world that we absolutely adore in nature, and that based on that, we think and we feel especially the importance of protection. And so we're trying to connect people who are beyond our families, of people that we already know that we share these values with. We're trying to reach further than that. And this is what I wanted to share with you, because I think it is a wonderful campaign. And if you want to know more, Guillaume knows how to contact me. And I wish you a very wonderful weekend. As I said, I would love to be there and listen, because I think listening is what we mostly need to do, to listen rather than to speak. This is my little contribution to your weekend. Best of luck and hugs to everyone.
Albert, que el veig ja animat.
I can see Albert is excited and ready to go. Now, before you come in, I would like to this movement that we're doing every year, this meeting wouldn't be possible without the volunteers and without our team of interpreters. Let's get a photograph of them.
Nevi. Bueno. Volved. Sí. Ana, Murphy, Silvana y Nuria, que han hecho, creo, una traducción impecable. Y tú luego. Por favor. Rafael. Bueno, tenim finalment aquí...
Well, finally, we have our closing session with Rafael and Albert. One thing, Albert, for translator, if you can try to speak a little slower. And try not to move the microphone around when you speak. That's why I'm applauding them so much. I know how much I make them suffer. Okay, this is about questions, isn't it? Questions and answers. While you're thinking about a question, I would like to mention one that someone posed to me, talking about the presentation that I gave. Ooh, I forgot what the question was. Oops. Is the person here? Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, question from the audience.
Albert, can you describe the world in 20 years' time, the world of your dreams, how you would love the world to be, in a few words?
Okay,
Bueno, yeah, I don't usually think too much about the future because, you know, normally my days are very simple. I wake up and I do what I want, I go to sleep. So it's hard to think of something so far away as 20 years, you know? But I can think of things I like. And since it's the world of my dreams, it doesn't need to be in 20 years. It could be now, right? So things that I would like the world to be like. Well, I guess for me, it wouldn't be so much one way of how the world should be. It's not that, you know, there would be one way how people would organize but I think the thing that I would desire the most is that now or in 20 years, especially, yeah, in 20 years, that we would still have the diversity of ways of doing things, the diversity of humans and people living in different ways that we have now, or just in life as well, like different species would also be nice, because I like humans, but yeah, I like variety more. So for me, yeah, in 20 years, maybe we would have found a way to fight the growing monoculturalism of the Western world, that it's absorbing all the other cultures and all the other societies. Maybe from inside, people would start building their own way to live or their own communities, which is already happening, but a lot more. Or even better, some way that we don't kill and enslave all the other cultures. That would be so cool. Yeah. One question. There's one near. Well, okay, otra.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. This question is for Alberto. I would like to know if behind that smile there is also someone that gets angry, that argues, well, someone like the rest of us, someone that's normal, someone that has problems, because you seem to be somewhat of an extraterrestrial, something like that, in the good sense of the word. And I think you're married and everything. Is that right? Isn't that means commitment, right? Okay, no, I'll tell you now. Okay, let me answer first to the extraterrestrial and then to the other part. As far as that is concerned, well, it's true that I'm a little bit strange. I'm a little odd. And perhaps at the emotional level, I am a little peculiar, but I do have lots of emotions. Sometimes I'm sad, or sometimes I feel fear. But getting angry, specifically, perhaps because of everything that I've lived, it's something that I've always had a hard time feeling. My parents even tell me that even when I was a child, they never saw me get angry. However, I have good news for you, and it's that I'm working on that. Because I came to a point in my life where I said, wait a minute, and all of these emotions, I mean, they're things that I have never felt. I've never felt jealousy. I've never been angry. Well, I think it would be cool. It would be nice to try these things as well. I'd like that. So I began to try to understand that, and I was working to see if I could feel that at some point. And this year, after a long time working at it, one day I actually got a little bit angry. I got mad, and I liked it. I mean, I enjoyed it. I felt, that I had achieved something there because I'd been working at it. But I have to say that getting angry, well, there are certain emotions that I just don't click with. It happens a lot with getting angry. the way I understand getting angry is that people get angry when they feel that another person isn't understanding their suffering. When someone is suffering, if I'm suffering and I feel that Rafa doesn't understand my suffering because I see that he's happy, or for whatever reason I just think he doesn't understand my pain, then there's an unconscious part of me that says, well, maybe if he suffered himself, he would understand me better. And that's when people yell or scream and throw things at each other. But I think that to get to that, you have to feel to a certain extent that you need to be understood, that it's needed, it's very important. Otherwise, you would never go to those extremes to be understood. So yes, perhaps in that reasoning, there's something that's not quite clicking inside of me, and well, that's your answer. As far as marriage, well, monogamy is something that has taken hold of many traditions, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way of working. A marriage, what is a marriage after all? What's a wedding? Sorry, what's a wedding? It's a party where you commit to love with someone. It's having fun. But there are other parts that are associated with commitment, such as the vows and things like that. I got married sometime, I think 3 years ago, with Andrea, who's here. Andrea, would you come up, please?
¿No quieres subir?
You don't want to come up? Well, we can explain it together so we can clarify the misunderstanding. Okay. No? Okay, well, let me explain it. At our wedding, one day we thought, well, hey, people have these great parties for celebrating that they love each other, and we love other people. We don't do that. That's kind of strange. Why not? And we said, no. I mean, we do what we want to do, right? For a reason, so let's do it. So we're going to have the party. But if we call it a party, who's going to come? Our friends. But if we call it a wedding, then even my grandmother will come, my sister will come, people from other countries might come to see us. And that's great that there's a lot of power in that word. So let's call it a wedding. But we'll do it our way. And our wedding, the main part of the wedding was to explain that that wasn't a normal wedding, to explain that there wouldn't be vows, that there wasn't any type of commitment, that what we wanted was to love what we want to love. And we gave ecstasy to all of the guests. There was an orgy, but I missed it. So it wasn't a normal wedding. It was a conventional wedding. I think the most conventional part was when it says you can kiss the bride, but instead of that, they said you can come and kiss the bride and groom. So everyone came up and gave us kisses. So I don't know if that's clarified, if that's answered your question. Yes, I think so. I think it has.
Bueno. Que en el fondo la cuestión es esta, ¿no? Que eso lo quiero añadir, que
But for me, it's important. An important thing in all of this is that free love, relational anarchy, loving who you want, it doesn't mean you have to have, superficial relationship with many people. You can have the same depth of relationship as someone who you're married to, and you can love someone with all of your heart, but that doesn't mean at all that you have to love only that person, that you have to desire that person will only love you. That stinks, no? I mean, a person would only be able to love me. No, I want that person I would be happy to see her fall in love with someone else and see, but at the same time, it's pressure, isn't it? So it's not something related to the importance or the depth of the relationships, but rather it is just to understand the path that best suits you. So a wedding is something that's powerful, and you express, hey, we love each other a great deal. Well, that fits, that works with open, free love.
Bé, pots intervenir, diàleg.
Que sí, que hables cuando quieras.
Yes, you can talk when you like, Rafael.
Hola.
Hello. I wanted to ask Rafael. I would like to ask a question of Rafael. Sorry, I said David. I meant Rafael. Yesterday you said that what unites us all is that our greatest quest is happiness, is our quest for happiness and love. And how little that is taught in school, the small amount of time that's used to try to decipher that formula. Do you have suggestions for the schools, for the teachers, for an educational system? Yes. What example can I give you? I went to a school once. It was a normal, school run by priests, and that's where I studied. That's why I studied in a school that was a Catholic school, and I was okay, but it was an all-boys school. And we had a certain, level of basic friendship among us, camaraderie. But when I got to the university, I was lucky in psychology because I met a group of friends that came from other schools that were freer. And I met a group of people that had a relationship of love, of intimacy, and it freaked me out. I couldn't believe it. In the first year, I said of my college study, university study, I said, "Wow, this is wild. This is great." But so I reflected on this, and I thought, okay. What type of relationship did I have in the school? No one had taught me that a relationship could be intimate like this, that could be, sharing with each other and, contributing to each other. Well, I think that the teachers could try to convey to kids the fact that relationship can be that cool, because sometimes we don't know it. We do what we see. And so you live your relationship differently that way. I mean, this is one of the things that could be done. And also, we need to teach people to collaborate, to relate to each other, to do things together. We were talking during this weekend with Albert, because Albert has lots of experience living in a group, in community, with other people, and we were saying you need to know how to live with others, because those of us that live in a more conventional manner, we've lost that capacity of living with others. We suddenly get mad, but there are tricks, there are solutions, there are methods, and coexisting, living together is very important, because that's what really makes us happiest. But this is something that could be taught in school as well. Yes, we've invited him to come to our home. Well, in general, it's not so much. Well, it's people live very isolated from when they're born. They have their room, they have their space, and you go to school and you start to be together with other people, but it's difficult to teach that unless life were more community-oriented. You go to school and something like that, but then you go back to your home and you have your parents, you have your space, you have your room. I don't know if it could be done by teachers, but I think it's something that you can learn. It's not something that you have to study. People that live in a tribe, if they're always living together, well, that knowledge comes naturally. That way of doing things, that way of thinking, because but we can have more control of what's going to have, or wait to have more control in our lives, because we live in very controlled environments. If I have a bedroom, no one's going to take it away from me. If I live in a community with 15 people, well, perhaps you won't find it in a month, So these are things you learn when you begin to live with others. I think that's what you're referring to.
¿Alguna pregunta?
Any more questions? Let's get out.
En aquestes jornades...
During this conference, we'll talk about creativity as a psychologist. What role is the culture of making an effort, the work ethic, and the culture of making sacrifices? Because life isn't just a hee hee ha hoo. It's not just a walk in the park. There's responsibility there. Apart from educating children, sometimes we have to put up with the difficult position of parents. That's an additional component. What do you think about work, culture of work, of effort, of can a child that's very young, can they choose? They can't choose if they're going to study this or study something else. We're the ones that have to choose that. So what's the role of this aspect in this whole issue? Well, I think the exercise of effort is cool because I make an effort many times, and I like to do that. I make an effort. I exert myself. I do sports, and I like to run further, and I enjoyed studying and making that exertion, that effort, the working at studying. So effort, exertion can be also something very fulfilling, something very joyful. You feel that you're working your muscles, and you say, hey, this is good, this is cool, and you see that you're getting better and you're going further. In that sense, I think that effort, exertion is good, and we can explain to kids that you can enjoy, you can feel happiness there. But sacrifice is a word that I'm not so keen on. Sacrifice, well, what does sacrifice mean? That's a very strange word for me, because I think that you do things if you're convinced that you have to do them, but then it's not a sacrifice, right? Well, effort, yes. But as long as that effort, that exertion is something that you enjoy, but I think you really have to, clarify that. There are different nuances, but in my position, I think, what could I say? I think that when something, it's hard to say. Let me give you an example. There's someone that I like a great deal as an author. He's the author of a book called Giving Up Smoking is Easy If You Know How To. And I recommend it to everybody that still smokes because I think it's the best method to stop smoking. So it's a book that breaks down the whole phenomenon of smoking. It makes it clear, explains how it works. And when you finish the book, you don't want to read anymore. You don't want to smoke anymore. You don't want to fall into that slavery of tobacco, and you're convinced of it. But he talks of an anecdote. He is already dead, but he went to school in the 50s in England, and he was a boxing champion in the primary school and secondary school in, scholastic competitions in half of England or whatever. But everyone admired him, his colleagues, his classmates, everybody admired him. But when he wrote his first book about giving up smoking, he said, let me confess something to you. I always hated boxing, always. Why did I do it? Well, at a certain moment in my childhood, I had this fear that people would think I was a coward, and that way I could exorcise that feeling. And I did that very strange thing, was to hit another kid and let myself be hit and pretend like we were both scared, and it was crazy. But to go to people and say, yes, sometimes I'm afraid, It was more difficult than boxing. But it wasn't the best thing. The best thing would have been, he said, for me to have been educated correctly and to have realized that being afraid is normal. And if there's something that you're afraid of, don't do it because you have a reason not to do it. For example, you don't know how to swim. Why should you get in the water? It's madness. You're afraid to hit someone, to have a fight with someone. Well, why would you fight with someone? It's anti-natural. No one likes to fight. In our society, it makes us see that what we need to do is precisely that, to jump into your fears. And that took him to do something strange, which was fighting with people. And so the ideas that we have about sacrifice, about struggle, about fighting, it means sometimes doing things that are unnatural to us. And the normal thing would be not to do it. But you don't need to develop bravery so that people, so you're not afraid of what others think of you. You do what is correct for you, and then you shouldn't care about what others think. But anyway, I haven't explained this very clearly, but just let me say that effort can be cool, it can be good, but everything that has a negative nuance, sacrifice, struggle, fight, it shows that you don't want to do it. You're not convinced that that's good for you. You're not enjoying it. Why do you want to do it? I would like to respond to that, if I could. I agree with what Rafa is saying, that effort can be good, but when it's mandatory, when you're forced to make a sacrifice, if it's your parents or the circumstances, that's not cool. But what I understand about effort, when it becomes culture, it's like we have to convince people. Those that want to make an effort should, and those that don't should. But no, they say that everyone needs to make an effort. And this comes from the idea that the world is a very difficult place, and to survive you have to work. And that's where they lose me, because the world is very tough, but it depends on how you live it and how you organize yourself. In Polynesia, when the anthropologists got there, they couldn't believe it because the Polynesians would have their traps with stones for the fish, where the fish would jump in and they couldn't get out. And they had their fruit, and they didn't work a minute a day. They would go to the trap, they would take the fish, they would get the fruit. They played and had fun all day long doing what they felt like. The first anthropologists that went there didn't tell us anything because they stayed. They decided to live there. And when later, when some of them returned, they told us about it. And there was a tradition in Polynesia of pairing up older people with a younger person that would be a sexual mentor. So for that reason as well. But that's an example. But there's one that's much better that I like to tell, and it reflects how a culture is always something that's invented. This idea of effort and that hard work dignifies you, that began to come up in the industrial period, where they said, yes, you have to work because we need more labor. We need people to work 10, 12 hours a day. This is not natural for human beings. In hunting-gathering societies, people work 2 hours a day. But when the Spanish colonists, the conquistadors, went to Central America and they began to create plantations, they had a problem. And it was that the indigenous didn't work. The indigenous peoples didn't work. And they started writing letters. The foreman of the plantations wrote back saying, listen, there's minerals, there's land, there's fish, and they're just under the trees playing music, talking, telling stories, and waiting for the bananas to fall off the tree so they can eat them, and they don't do anything else. Well, I think that's fantastic. There's nothing bad about that, to do nothing other than eating the trees that fall, eating the bananas that fall from the trees and telling stories and playing an instrument. It doesn't take a lot of effort or a lot of hard work to do that, but then the response came from Spain. They said, burn down the banana trees, and that's when they had to start working. And then they said, yes, they said, yes, it's worth working because that way we can eat. But yeah, that happened after they burned down your banana trees. So we're in a world that requires working hard to survive. But let's not think that this is the only world that exists or the natural world. It's a world that has been manufactured, that has been created to, to provide money to those that, the capitalists. Sure.
Albert, you have been in many countries. What are the differences between shame, pain, etc., between our Western world and other cultures? So you're asking me what is the difference in the feeling of shame and what is it, compassion? Okay, so compassion and shame. How do we feel it here and how is it felt in other countries? I think where I see the most differences, maybe, I think the biggest division I see is from the moment or the biggest difference is between nomadic or sedentary cultures. In the nomadic cultures, the tribal concept is almost impossible to divide. It's not a family with its house and its fields, which could be more community-oriented than what we're living here now, but it's even more so for nomadic people. So hunter-gatherers who are nomads, there's very little inequality. You can't accumulate things. You can't have more than others. I mean, where would you keep it? Where would you carry it? Everything's being used constantly and discarded. If you hunt something really big, you eat until you can no longer eat it, and then you leave it. So you can't accumulate stuff. So compassion is a bit strange as a feeling because there isn't that difference. You may need to have a hierarchy in order to have that. When I get there and I can't walk, they don't seem to mind. Whereas in the Western world, people seem to feel guilty or they feel bad for their own privileges or whatever. But over there, they just laugh at you and they touch your legs and things, and I laugh with them. So there is no shame or guilt in that respect. And there's a lot less privacy. So there's a lot less feeling of things being something that cannot be told, or there's secrets, because you can't really have a secret there or be ashamed about something that you don't want the others to know, because everything is kind of known by everyone. So funny things everyone laughs at. So if you trip over, people laugh at you in the face. I like it that way because then I can laugh too. I laugh a lot, so it's happened to me that it's happened to me more that people get offended because I laugh than that people laugh at me and I get offended. So things like shame or being embarrassed about things that you don't want others to know, there is no privacy really, so you can't hide things in the same way. So before they were talking, Albert, about the culture of effort and sacrifice, and you were talking about the banana people. I think here we can find people who are kind of asleep. They have their parents who are at the service of them having food on the table, clean bed sheets. And that worries me enormously because actually we have a generation of young people who are not moving and who kind of have everything done for them. And that scares me. I see it in my relationships. And it worries me that I'm kind of the one who breaks into young people's lives and says, well, aren't you passionate about anything? Does anything move you? No, I'm fine. I've got my food. My mom does my washing and everything. So that worries me. How do we deal with this? Because it's almost like the living dead with no passion. Both of us. What concerns me or worries me about that situation is more the mother than the son. So what happened? How can somebody end up convinced? What kind of setup makes that person do all that work for the son if she doesn't want to do it as well? Because, I mean, if she wants to do it, that's fine. If the mother wants and the son wants, well, everybody's happy, then it doesn't worry me too much. The mother's like the banana tree that provides everything. So that's quite normal that the kid does nothing. Perhaps when the mother dies or circumstances change, the kid will wake up and it won't be a tragedy for him to have been without caring for himself all this time. When he can no longer do that, he'll have to wake up and he'll have to get on with it. But we're assuming that the mother's not that happy with the situation. And I would speak to the mother and say, well, don't do it. Don't make his food. Don't iron his clothes. Why are you doing something you don't want to do? Let him, or throw him out of home if you want, whatever you want. But I think the strangest structure that I see there is a mother doing that when she doesn't want to do it. When somebody that has everything done for them. I actually don't like my clothes being ironed, but if somebody was always washing my clothes or doing my dishes, if somebody wanted to do that, I'd say, okay, cool, do it. Wonderful. But it would be about asking yourself about that strange thing that we think that your kids are your responsibility and you need to do everything for them. And so that it just goes on and on in time, and the chains are not broken. You know, the umbilical cord is not broken. And so, I mean, that person will have to find their own way and sort themselves out when they can no longer live off of that. I totally agree. In fact, I think that often in the education of parents and children, there's a lot of confusion, and responsibility is taken away, the right of having their own responsibility. So the parents cover for the responsibility of the kids. It's normal for everyone to know that their actions have consequences, and it's okay. And then you can value if those consequences are positive or not. For example, I had a girlfriend once who had 2 children, 2 daughters, who were something like 9 and 11 or 8 and 10 years old. They all got on really well. But sometimes she would say to me, you know, at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted because these kids are, you know, they can get up to some naughty stuff during the day. So by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. And she asked me for my advice, and I realized that she was doing this. So I said to her, look, give me an example of something that you're fed up with. And she says, well, for example, we're on the bus to school, and sometimes they make such a noise on the bus that I end up saying, you know, behave yourselves. They're shouting at each other. So it's really tiring. And I said to you, okay, one thing you could do is that when they start to do that on the bus, you just say to them, okay, we're getting off the bus now. You get off the bus, and you say, okay, we've had to get off the bus because you don't yet know how to go on the bus. But it's okay. We'll just walk to school, which is also cool. So even if it's very hot, or it's summer, or it's cold, whatever, her name's Carol, and she would say, but they're going to get so angry if you do that. They're going to be late to school, and they don't like that. And then you say, well, it's okay. You're going to be late. You'll have to apologize. You're not going to be killed for doing that. It's okay, with joy. And so they will protest, and then you'll have to say, well, if you want to learn how to go on the bus properly, well, the next time you can watch other people and see how they go. Those people who know how to go on the bus, you watch them and learn from them. And then we can go on the bus, but it's not necessary to go on the bus. We don't need to go on the bus. And that's it. If they want to learn to go on the bus, they can do. And if they don't think it's a good deal, then they won't learn. but don't take away the responsibility from them. Don't go on the bus excusing yourself before people, you having a bad time. You haven't done anything. You're behaving yourself. It's they the ones who are misbehaving and who shouldn't be allowed to be on the bus. And she gave me another example that was even worse. We went for lunch somewhere with my mother to a restaurant, so they started arguing in the restaurant. And I said, well, you've got a great opportunity there again. You take the waiter and you say to him, look, do you have plastic and glasses and plates? Well, please put the food outside at the entrance of the restaurant, and you have them, and we put them out there to have food. And you can say to the girls, look, girls, since you don't yet know how to eat in a restaurant, we're going to put you outside with plastic plates and glasses, and you can eat out there until you learn. And she said, oh, they're going to be really upset by that. Well, if they still don't know how to sit in a restaurant and be good and be behaved, then do that. And if they don't like it, they'll learn really quickly. So hi, I'm the interpreter who was here. Thank you very much. It's been a real joy to listen to you these days. I have a question as a mother. I have my daughter here who's 14. And this is the first year that she's going to school and not enjoying it. So we thought that, yes, we think that it's her life and it's her responsibility and she has the freedom to choose. So my question, since we're here talking about this, is what would you advise to her? What would you advise her? And say, well, okay, stop studying, or maybe you can do other things. If you don't follow the mainstream, what do you think? What would you say to her? She's here. Why don't you like it? Because it's boring? I think it's all really strict. They don't let us have our freedom and our way of living. There's a lot of theory. It's very academic. And it's pretty stressful because it's a lot of homework, a lot of exams. You have no freedom to do what I would like to do. And what would you like to do? I would like to do things like art and music and design, theater, stuff like that. That doesn't have to be something that I have to sit down and learn a theory and memorize things, or things that are a bit more creative. And my last question, would you like to be paid to do that? Yeah, but only because it's necessary. Society needs that, and I guess that's why. It's what everybody knows. It's our concept to work and get paid. Well, personally, what I think in general, when you've said that she should do something anyway. So you said you wanted her to do something, that if she stops going to school, that she should equally be doing something? No, I don't want her to do anything. But I imagine that if she leaves school, she could do other things, because otherwise she's going to get really bored. Which I guess if she wants to get bored, it's her choice. From your perspective, you went traveling when you're 14 or 15 around the world. Do you have anything to say to her? Perhaps she has the same idea that you have, and she'll go off in a year. Those details help to get an idea. I don't think there's much relationship between having studied or not. if they stopped school or they finished school, I think happiness has to do with other things, like finding things you like to do, that you really want to do, that the way that you think or how you perceive things that happen. So it seems like there's no problem. She doesn't want to go to school anymore. She's lucky enough that her parents will let her do what she wants, and you have things you want to do, art and design and stuff. And in fact, art is one of the areas in which it's easier. I was asking about money because generally it's really easy to do something that you like if you don't expect to be paid for it, because you just do it and that's it. And that's really cool. That's what I prefer. But even so, if you want to be paid, it seems like art is one of the activities in which it's less important to have some kind of academic title, because you can learn from people who are already doing it. You can go to courses. You could even go do a middle training or higher training if you decide to one day. But independently of what the world thinks, whether I want to or not, it doesn't make sense for you to do something now that you don't fancy doing. If in 4 years you want to go back to studying, you'll do the access test and you'll do whatever you want. I don't see any problem in this situation. I think that after the age of 13 or 14, whoever doesn't want to study shouldn't be going to school. I really think that. I've seen a lot more people who are stressed out because they continued studying when they didn't want to. And it's not like she's doubting. Unless it's a specific problem where somebody's bullying her at school. No, it's just she doesn't fancy it, and the structural reasons that she's talking about exist in most schools in the world. It would be different. The feeling I get is that it's pretty clear to you. I think that even for any reason, even if there isn't a logical reason, but maybe she likes to go to school, but there's something about her school she doesn't like, in which case she could go to another school. But in this case, well, I've seen a lot of people who are unhappy because they've wasted a lot of years studying, and then they regret that. And the other thing is much easier. Do other things, and there's no rule that says that you can't be a late student. Some people at 30 years old decide that's what I want to do now. So next year, you can tell us what you did. When we come back next year, tell us what you did. An opinion about this. It seems like often I get parents calling me. It seems like if the kid doesn't want to study, it's a drama. For example, Satish didn't go to school. Was that a drama? Is his life a drama? Albert hasn't gone to school. Well, I did, actually. I went to university even, to philosophy, but because I wanted to go. I'm also an example of somebody, I didn't go to school. You have somebody here who didn't go to school either. And I've done pretty well. And he was given money for what he was doing. And I feel relatively happy. So I don't think that it's fundamental, especially for you. Because I'm talking from intuition, but what I've heard of you, I think you need to stop school immediately. It doesn't make sense for you to be there because you're going to suffer. And in life, we need to avoid suffering and pain. You can't avoid pain, but you can avoid the suffering. And so my advice is get out of school and walk in the world. Because there's many people and books and experiences that you can learn from. And if you don't walk, it doesn't matter either. I think the greatest teacher in life is within you. So go within yourself, and there you will discover everything. The big answers are within you. Everything, the most important things of life, love, compassion, empathy, I can't find the word for something that's really important. Wisdom, that's it, is within you. It should be like a religion. You're a spiritual being. If you need religion, religion is like a crutch. If you need it, okay. And if you don't, that's fine. Perhaps your school are like crutches and your teachers are like crutches. If you need them, great. If you don't, walk alone.
This is weird.
Hola. Hola.
Hi. Guillem. We're from a village, and it seems easy to play, but we used to have squares and spaces where we could do that, and that's now disappeared because now for our kids it's more important for us to sign them up to a piano class or an English class, and they don't have time to play. And something that has happened is that our streets and our squares are no longer good to play at, because businesses need to be sustained that are more interesting than playing. We need to recover streets and squares. For me, democracy is something that we learned at school, playing with other kids. In Franco's days, we were Democrats because we would play a football game where we would choose the players on each side with respect. And perhaps there was somebody who was bigger than you, and he would say, "You're going to leave because I'm going to play here." And we would leave, but we're respecting our elders. We decided if we wanted to play football or go and steal almonds. This is something we would decide in the school playground, which used to be open. And now school playgrounds need to be closed and fenced. You can't go and play there anymore. I'd go and play at my local school if I could, but you're not allowed. Creativity. The football game was played with 2 T-shirts, and there was no goal posts. We were really creative with that. They've stolen our streets and squares from us. How are we going to get kids to recover all of that and play once again? Generally, when I'm somewhere where I'm doing something that people don't like me to do, I go somewhere else. It's too much work to try to fight the government, convince other people who don't think the way I do. Perhaps they like the way the squares are now. Others won't. So what I think at the end of the day is that you can find a solution that is alternative instead of struggling to change things. If people are so unhappy with how the squares are, then, well, I guess that's also relative, because at the end of the day, I'm going to do whatever I want anyway. I've been arrested for sitting on a bench in the wrong position, but I was comfortable and I didn't want to change my posture because of the way Barcelona benches are. It's not that you need to submit to that, but maybe you need to find alternative strategies. Perhaps you need to leave and go a bit further. It's not that far. You can go to Africa and you can play in the squares there. People really don't mind. Or you can go to forests or other places. But how to get a culture or society like this one for everyone to agree that kids should be able to play in the squares again. Perhaps the kids don't want to play in the squares anymore. They prefer to play with their mobile phones or the computers. There's many factors included there. So it's something that we need to see whether it's something we want or whether the kids want. If a kid wants to play in the square with other kids and they can't, then yes, the parents should and could go and do something about it and go and explore the possibility of finding a different space where the kids can play. In Spain, here, for example, there's really beautiful eco-villages where the kids are playing all day. So I'm not sure if the solution is to force the squares or whatever to be transformed, or rather to come together with people who are in tune with your ideas and who have kids who also want to get together to play in the streets. Of course, if at the same time we transform society by carrying out these actions, then of course it's very beautiful to think of the kids playing in the square and we could transform it. But if right now I had a kid who wants to play in the square and he can't, well, I would go and find another square, find another place to play where there's other kids. Maybe you can join other people who gets organized, and then so we do it together. So my question is in relation to the previous questions. There's lots of teachers here, and I would ask you that you give us some advice to treat these kids or deal with these kids who are going to class and they don't want to be there. I think that this is hugely problematic for everyone, and for the teachers, it's really difficult to give a class. Also, many teachers here, probably public employees, civil servants, and so at some point of their lives, they're probably wondering whether they should stop teaching. Because from my point of view, it's a huge emotional weight to spend your whole life doing this. So what advice would you give to these young people, these difficult kids, considered difficult kids, and to the teachers who may decide sometime to leave this wonderful, important job? So the first question, I would say that what you are talking about is pretty simple. The kid doesn't want to be in school. The teacher doesn't want that kid in class. It's not they don't want them there. They don't want them to be causing trouble and to be unhappy, etc. So who wants them to be in school? Who wants that kid to be that way? The first problem would be the parents. If the kid doesn't want to be in class and the teacher is suffering problems because of that, that's not right. But if the parents are the ones who want the child to be there and there's no way out of that, then make a deal between the teacher and the child and decide, okay, what is it you want then? You can't force this kid to learn and do exams. The function of the school isn't working with this kid. So what would that kid like to do? Let him play, be on his mobile phone, doing his own stuff? Well, let him do it. Or not do exams? Okay, don't do them. Give him a 5 and a pass, and off he goes. Yes, the ideal would be a different thing, but I don't know how I could convince a kid to do something that he doesn't want to do and to do something as boring as going to school. And I think teachers have already tried that, otherwise, and it hasn't worked. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking of this as a problem. So talking to him So if people who know a lot more than I do haven't managed to convince that child speaking with him, then perhaps they need to dialogue in a different way, because it sounds like they're both on the same side, actually. Something else we could add is that what a lot of these kids are doing is kind of be rebellious. They misbehave in the class because it's fun. Perhaps what you can do is to appreciate the dynamite. So maybe you can put him in front of everyone and say, come on, you can dynamite the class as much as you want, or for a bit, and we'll all have a laugh and have a good time. It's fine. So not to make it a rebellion, because it's a rebellion if the other side is opposed, or perhaps they can let them be joking around until they get fed up. We may not finish the whole class, but is it that important to finish the whole class? See what happens if you do that. In Summerhill, there's many stories of kids who arrived who were very difficult and who would really misbehave. And so there was one kid, there was somebody painting a door, and that kid took the bucket of paint and threw it on the door. If at that point, the teacher said, if I was to tell him off, then that's it. It's become antagonic. It's become a fight. He's going to see me as an authority figure. And so what he did was take some paint and throw it on other doors and say, yeah, this is really cool, let's do it. And went with him to throw paint on the walls. And the kid loved it. And so another one was a kid that pretended to be his uncle, calling up the school and said that they were going somewhere that weekend and that they should give him some money to do something, and then the parents would give it back. The director believed it and gave the kid some money, and the outing had not yet happened. So before the outing that day, the mother called the school, and the mother said, and the director said, oh, we've given him the money that you asked for. And she said, what? I didn't know. What do you mean? And so that's how the director found out. And he said, okay, if I ask that kid to give me the money back, then I'm the enemy, I'm the authority. So he said, your mom called and she said, I should give you 5 more euros for tomorrow. This kid then realized the director had discovered the lie, because his mother would never say that, and he got so confused that he just didn't do it again. You know, he just couldn't continue with that game. So I think you always need to go in that direction. Those kids are trying to undo the structure, and they're struggling. And so we need to undo that as well, the structure of authority and punishment and all of that. So I think in this case, both people are on the same side. They don't want, the kid doesn't want to be there, the teacher doesn't want him to be bothering everyone else, so they're actually on the same side. Okay, there's more people with questions. There's something about Raphael's theory that on the one hand I feel is very interesting, and on the other hand, for me, I would find it really complicated. I'll explain the case. I'm somebody who is very impulsive. So my character is, well, basically, I have a quick temper. I'm a working mother with 3 daughters. One is an adolescent of 13, a child of 4, and another one of 6. I think these ideas could be very good, very often in my life. And I do think that the problems are more of the parents and not the children, and those mothers that say, that are constantly shouting at the kids. And I don't want to be that way. But in reality, in the reality of the moment, where they've been playing up time and time again, and you've got some things that you've organized, and you're trying to get to the end of the day to have the calmness, the cold-bloodedness even, that when they're misbehaving, to say, okay, so let's just sit now and watch you do your little show and have a laugh about it, rather than I'm going to chop your head off if you don't stop that. It's difficult. So I find it difficult to make that real for me. And to actually be able to do that together with certain rules in the house, because otherwise, and I know this because I have quite a lot of tendency to chaos and my own personal chaos. I can control it more or less. But when there's 4 or 5 of us in a house with chaos, it's a disaster. If I don't make an effort, then they wouldn't even eat at a reasonable time or go to bed at a reasonable time. I mean, there's some things that you do have to do. So I think this theory, I think that for somebody more reflexive, could be easier. For me, it's actually really difficult to implement in the day-to-day of my situation or of many people who are probably here. I do many things badly. I'm talking about the ideal a little bit, which is something I also try to do, and we all fail. I think that the educational role is a work that involves time, enjoying it, little by little, patience. I think it's really cool when you have kids, which I don't have, but I would do lots of Saturday and Sunday mornings of trainings. So, for example, of how to wear your clothes. There was a mother who was saying to me once, my children, as you were saying, my children make me so angry sometimes. I get so pissed off at times because I took them to school this morning. We're leaving, we're getting out of the car, and the little guy was already dragging his new jacket that I spent so much money on. He's dragging it along the floor. And I've told him 1,000 times. But you know what? Paul doesn't know the importance of wearing that jacket in a different way, and he doesn't know how to do it. People don't learn, or are not born knowing this. We sometimes forget that learning is a process. And for example, when we already know how to drive, we think it's really easy. But before you do drive, it's really hard. So why not, from now on, Saturday mornings, you do a workshop with your kids on how to wear your clothes when you leave the car. So we designed it together. And she put a sign up in the house, this Saturday, workshop. The kids were amazed. And she showed them the different ways and why it was so cool to wear your jacket correctly. I remember that there was and she did like a model catwalk with it. So when you take your jacket and you come outside, you could wear it, for example, the French way, which is here, over your arm, like a French waiter. And they spent all Saturday morning how to carry this anorak the French way. Another one was the American way, which was to put it around their neck and tie it up, because the Superman and people like that have a cape. Then around their waist. Why is it cool? Because it doesn't get dirty, because then you can wear it for longer, it will last longer. And they were practicing not one Saturday, but a number of Saturdays, and they even practiced with the car. Everyone in the car wearing the... So you can think, okay, if I need to teach my child each of those things with Saturday morning workshops, this is going to be like a massive job. I'm convinced of something, though. You're going to gain a lot more time. It's actually going to be a lot easier, because the things that he learns will be well learned and forever, and you won't need to repeat it time and time again. However, if we don't dedicate time to this detailed kind of learning, that they feel proud of knowing how to do things that are cool, because actually kids want to know how to do things. They want to feel adults. They want to feel like they're big boys and big girls. If it's a voluntary learning that's cool and that they can do it with short steps, sometimes we forget that kids have limited intelligence as they grow up. You know, people who have dogs and speak to them all the time, the dog's never going to answer you. But sometimes we think that the dog is more intelligent than he is. We humanize the dog a little bit. And I think people do this. Adults with children, they think the child has an intelligence that they don't have. Knowledge more than intelligence. No, and intelligence too, because a 4-, 5-, 6-year-old child has to learn things through training. So it's a case of training. But I think that the effort that seems more of an effort to start with, I think will save you a lot of work in the long run, because those changes will be more permanent. Oftentimes, we talk about the ways to get the kids to adapt to the parents, for them to learn things, like go on the bus, that they should learn how the adults do things. But there's the other side also, is that often the adults can adapt to the kids. And in fact, it's the adults who've brought the kids here. The kids didn't ask for it. So it makes sense to say, okay, you were able to plan this. There's going to be a kid in this house, and he or she's going to adapt to everything I want. But maybe you can adapt to what the child is going to need. And in that sense, I often remember the freest and most beautiful family I've ever seen, which was 2 parents in Australia who had 6 kids. Their kids were really independent and autonomous. And I got up one morning and saw the little one, who was, 3 years old? The little one? Yes, he was about 3. And he was cooking on the fire at 3 years old some noodles. And I asked and said, do you cook a lot? And he went, oh, yeah, it's really easy. Look, it's like this, with boiling water. The house was really chaotic. And I asked the parents, what do you think of all this? And they said, well, bear in mind that with our kids, we're a team. There isn't anyone who is in charge here. So actually, we're a minority. They are 6 and we are 2. So actually, it's a lot more up to them to define how things should be. And they actually were very cool about this. The house is untidy. They could provide ideas to the group, but the group had a majority of children who are a lot wilder and disorganized. And I think that the key for things to work so well was that for them it was really clear that their work was not to get those kids to behave differently. But there was one of the kids who had never wanted to learn to read. She was 11. She did loads of things. She created amazing sculptures made out of wool because she simply wanted to do that. And she'd seen some videos and learned and taught herself. And she hadn't learned how to read and write. But as she was looking on YouTube to learn more about the wool story, she then got an interest in learning how to read. So she started to learn for herself. So the parents were like, we don't have to have the expectation that the house and the kids and the space is going to be in a certain way. And how did they get on, actually, this family? Was there a good atmosphere? Yeah. There was never the feeling, I never had the feeling there that something had to be in a certain way. And there was a moment when myself and one of the younger kids, and we had a bit of a food fight, and so we made a bit of a mess. And the parents said, do you fancy cleaning? And I said, yes, of course. And the younger one said, no. And I said, oh, okay. So one of the others said, well, go on, I fancy cleaning. So one of the others helped me to clean up, who hadn't done anything. So that was really cool. There was like no feeling of responsibility or obligation. Well, if somebody wants this to be clean, let's just get down to it and clean.
Well, Guillaume is telling me that you each have 1 minute to say goodbye. Okay, it's been a pleasure for me to be with you. I've had a wonderful time. In my case, if you want to know more about psychology, I've talked about very diverse things, but if you're interested and you want to know more about cognitive psychology, well, there are books, apart from mine, there are other books out there. And as Satish said before, and I think it's something that's very important, most likely I personally have said things that are inapplicable, that just can't be applied. I'll be here a year from now and I'll say things that are different. And maybe I'll say, I made a mistake. So don't pay attention to everything I say. But if there is something that can be useful, that can help in any way, well, then that's great, and I'm very glad for that. Well, I've had a great time. I've really had a good time, and the same. When you ask me questions, I tell you what I feel like saying. Any authority takes me through very complicated routes. If I had to pay attention, if I had to obey, I think things would be difficult for me. But the idea is just to convey ideas and have fun, and I've really enjoyed being here. And thanks to the interpreters, I know that I'm one of the most difficult ones to translate because of my speed.
Sí, no, queda aquí i ara ens despedim amb una música. No, només donar-vos les gràcies per...
I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to wish peace and love for all of you, and ignorance and